There's a reason your solos don't sound as good as those of Wes Montgomery and George Benson. And no, it's not just magic or luck. There are 3 simple tricks they use in their solos that make them unforgettable. In this video, I'm gonna show you those 3 tricks so that you don't end up stuck playing random phrases next to each other and instead create something memorable. This is a core part of all great jazz solos, and it isn't really that complicated. When I first started learning jazz, I did what everyone says, practiced scales and arpeggios until my fingers hurt, and I thought, well, I need to play the right notes if I ever want to sound like a pro. But I had a problem. My solos sounded like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces from 3 different boxes. Even though I was correct, it was a mess. Fragmented, disconnected, and honestly also a bit boring. Let me show you exactly what I mean and then compare that to a great George Benson line. Why doesn't this work? There are 3 problems. I was starting with a new idea for every bar and I was always starting on beat 1. And then I was also adding this awkward pause to think about what to play on the next chord. Try and compare this to this George Benson line. So what's the difference? Benson doesn't just play the right notes, he connects his ideas across the chords. Notice how he lands on the 3rd of A7 and also on D7. He's clearly signaling the chord change in a way that your ear just can't miss, and that's what makes his solo flow and sound intentional. Now, if you're stuck playing random phrases on each chord, don't worry, it's a totally normal stage to be at, but you can start fixing it right now. Let me show you a simple way to make your solo sound like real music, not just a bunch of correct notes. And then I'm gonna show you 2 more tricks that you'll hear from Wes Montgomery and Jim Hall, which are both essential for melodic solos. Here's the big secret. Great jazz solos don't just wander around the fretboard. They're always moving towards something, and that's what makes them sound exciting and connected instead of random or stuck. Think about the George Benson example you just heard. His lines don't just fill space. They're aiming for the next chord, almost like the melody is sort of pushing you forward. Jazz musicians call this forward motion, and it's actually the same idea that Bach used in his music, even if jazz throws in some extra spicy notes along the way. Hal Galber wrote a great book about this, and the main idea is quite simple. Don't just play notes, aim for a target note. Every phrase should use notes that drive forward and land on that target note. That's what gives your solo direction, and this is also what Benson does in his solo. The phrases are moving toward the 3rd so that it confirms the chord change and also gives the solo that natural flow. But there is one more secret ingredient, the exact notes that he's aiming for. Now, if you get this wrong, the whole phrase will fall apart. Let's talk about picking the right target notes, because this is where a lot of jazz advice gets pretty confusing. You've probably been told that the 3rd and the 7th are the most important notes in a chord. And that's true for comping, but when it comes to soloing, it's a little bit different. Let's use a 2-5-1 in C major as an example. D minor 7, G7 to C major 7. The 3rd of each chord is still a fantastic target note, like you heard in the Benson example, because it's strong and clear, but the 7th, not so much. On D minor 7, the C doesn't really sound like a D minor 7 on its own. This sounds much more like a C major chord. So having that as a target note is going to be a bit more difficult. The 5th A is, however, a very good target note instead, which is sort of weird because that's the first note you would throw out of the chord if you're comping. But check out how often that is actually a target note in solos. Now this is true for C major 7 as well. Here the 7th B won't really sound like you're resolving to a 1 chord. It just sounds like you're staying on the 5, because kind of sounds like. Of course, you can use the 7th in more advanced lines, but when you're just starting out, just stick with the notes that leaves no doubt about the chord change and are easy to play to. That makes your solo sound much more connected and musical right away. Let's make this really simple to start with. Just like George Benson, practice aiming for the 3rd as your target note on every chord. Here's how you do it. Come up with D minor 7 lines that move toward and land on B, so the 3rd of G7. For example, something like or this variation. These lines are super simple and you don't always have to start on the F of D minor 7, but listen to how the melody just naturally leads your ear to the next chord. And that's the magic of forward motion. Now, once you're comfortable with this, you can start to embellish your lines, add trills, leading notes and other things to make things more interesting. Something like this. Did you notice how the target note sometimes lands on the and of 4? This makes the phrase lighter and less predictable. And this is just the next step. Same concept, just a bit more playful. Here's how to practice. Start by composing simple lines that hit the third of each chord. Improvise over a basic turnaround or a 2-5-1, even in rubato, so just out of time, just to get used to aiming for those target notes. And gradually you can move into playing in time and finally try it out over a real song. If you practice like this, your solos will instantly sound more connected and musical. No more copy-pasted random licks, and you will never sound like bebop without this. Now, once you get started playing in time, then it gets a lot easier to also hit the target notes on the forehand and on the offbeats to lighten things up. But there is another trick that Wes and Jim Hall used that works in any style, and it's why people remember their solos decades later. Here's a secret behind the most memorable solos. It's not about playing the most notes or the fanciest arpeggios. It's about making your phrases stick in people's minds. And Jim Hall is a master of this. Check out this phrase from his solo on Stella by Starlight. What Jim Hall is doing here is called motivic development. He takes a short, simple phrase, a motif, and repeats it, changing it slightly each time. And notice how strong the rhythm is too, with syncopation and anticipation. These 4 bars are really all just built from just one simple 4-note idea. First on D minor 7. It's a very simple 4-note motif, but that is also why he can use it through the chords like this. First, it's repeated on the G7, but now with an added note and of course also some extra syncopation. Next, he moves it to C major 7 by shifting down everything a step in the scale. And finally, he adds sort of a conclusion on the F7, which both makes the F7 clear and naturally rounds off the 4-bar period. Jim Hall does this all the time, and it's a huge part of what makes his solo so great. Wes Montgomery is another legend at this. Check out how Wes takes a simple motif and some rhythm. Here Wes starts with the syncopated version and then plays sort of a more straight on the beat version. Back to the syncopated version, but then of course move down. And then rounding it off with this phrase. This isn't just about picking the right scale or arpeggio, it's about playing ideas that people can remember. So let's look at how you can practice bringing this into your own playing. The first step for motivic development is learning to recognize motifs in the music that you already listen to and know. So start by listening to solos that you already know and enjoy, and see if you can pick out those little phrases that keep coming back. And you might be surprised how often great players rely on this simple concept. Now, here's how you practice it yourself. When you practice, begin out of time, so rubato, play a short, simple phrase. So here I'm essentially just playing 2 notes, and then see how you can move that idea through the chord changes. Here I'm using a turnaround in C major. Just repeat it, change it a little bit, and experiment. Once you're comfortable moving the motif around rubato, then try it out in time. And then you can of course challenge yourself to stick with a single motif over an entire song, just to see how many ways that you can develop it. Now, don't buy into the myth that players like Wes Montgomery or Jim Hall are just sort of born with magic talent. The real secret is the clarity and focus of their melodic ideas. And if you train your ear and practice developing motifs, your solos will naturally sound more musical and intentional as well. You can easily both enjoy their playing and learn to use the same things that make their playing magic. Motifs are incredibly powerful, but Wes adds one more step, shaping solos like conversations that pull you along from start to finish. Let's check that out. If you want your solos to be more engaging and really capture the listener's attention, then try treating them like a conversation. Action and reaction just naturally creates a story. And in music, this is called call and response, where one phrase asks a question and the next phrase answers it. It's like having a musical conversation with yourself. Check out how Wes does this. And here's another great example where Wes uses octaves and single note lines to make the back and forth even clearer mixing techniques. Listen to how each phrase feels like it's replying to the previous one. That's what makes Wes solo feel alive and interactive, not just a stream of notes. Now with both motivic development and chord response, it's all about playing simple, short phrases, and that is where the music is. And this approach isn't just for solos, it works for chords as well. Start with simple, easy chords and then add the rest as melody and embellishment. Now to level up how you work with chords, check out this video on the simple strategy Joe Pass used for his amazing jazz chord work. You won't always be playing solos, so developing your chord and chord melody skills is essential, and this makes that 100 times easier. Check it out, learn jazz, make music.